All right, this is going to be an important video. People are not talking enough about the far-right school shooting that happened at the exact same time Charlie Kirk was assassinated. Now, both of them are absolutely tragic, and both of them are examples of the same thing. Young white males being radicalized online and then enacting real-world violence. So this video is going to serve a few purposes. Number one, it is going to bring attention to this story. But number two, I want to narrative break. I want to disrupt the right-wing narrative that's been going around that left-wingers are uniquely violent. That is not borne out by any data at all, and it's actually the exact opposite. So stick around till the end. We're going to dig into all of the stats, but let's just start here. The Colorado high school shooter that shot up Evergreen High School at the exact same time Charlie Kirk was shot was, quote, radicalized by some extremist network, Sheriff's Department says. The shooter was identified by police as a 16-year-old student. And we need to talk about this because I was the same age as Tyler Robinson, the 22-year-old Charlie Kirk shooter, and I'm only a few years older than this dude. I know people who have gone down this same right-wing rabbit hole. Obviously, they haven't enacted violence, but it's due to a few things. Young white males have always seemed to have been prone to radicalization, but this has only been accelerated by COVID-era isolation that had a lot of young men in bubbles, isolated, and then it's a struggle to regain a lot of these social connections after COVID. I've seen it happen. I had to intentionally break out of my bubble after COVID was over. Some people don't break out of that bubble and they continue to be isolated and get sucked down these algorithms. And then we are seeing an acceleration of these shootings happen. I'm also pretty sure that both foreign and domestic actors are trying to incentivize this. So Russia benefits by weakening social cohesion and more school shootings. China benefits when we have more radicalization, and politicians inside the United States are promoting this type of radicalization and insane rhetoric. But a 16-year-old student who authorities say opened fire at his Colorado high school on Wednesday, wounding two classmates and then turning the gun on himself, was believed to be, quote, radicalized by some extremist network, officials with local sheriff's office said. The gunfire at Evergreen High School broke out at about 12:24 p.m. local time. 3 students were taken to the hospital in critical condition. One student jumped on another to save his life. The suspect was identified as 16-year-old Desmond Holly, and he was radicalized by some social network that was just littered with anti-Semitism, Nazism, far-right insanity. Another article reads, Colorado school shooting suspect reportedly expressed neo-Nazi white supremacy views online. Now, again, we need to disrupt the right-wing narrative. So to do that, I'm going to bring in Mockler Media's lead policy advisor, Micah Irfan. Make sure you drop a like, subscribe to the channel, and watch until the end. Micah, let's just start here. Can you break down some of the raw facts as it pertains to right-wing violence versus left-wing violence?
Right. Of course, we are Democrats. We're liberals. We don't support any sort of violence. And a lot of the narrative that's come from the right is that all acts of violence from the left are somehow attributable to Democrats. Totally not true. This last shooter, in the Kirk shooter, is somebody who wasn't a registered Democrat. There's no indication they ever voted for a Democrat. So we don't own this shooting at all, and we completely condemn it. But if we do want to get into a comparison about which side, left or right, commits more acts of political violence, well, the data is clear. There's 3 studies that have been conducted on this, one by the Prosecution Project, which shows overwhelmingly right-wing ideologies are responsible for more criminal cases of political violence. Another study was done by Alex Narasta, which is a person who works at the Cato Institute, which is a libertarian right-wing think tank. He tabulated the number of left and right-wing murders over the past 50 years or so, and he found that there's substantially more right-wing murders for the purposes of political assassination than left-wing ones. The ADL, another source, shows that the vast majority, about 75% of politically motivated assassinations and crimes come from right-wingers. So if we want to have this comparison, it's clear that there's more violence coming from the extreme right. To point to one specific example, let's look at Vance Bolter, the guy who killed Melissa Hortman and her husband. Vance was a registered Republican who had preached against homosexuality in church. He had gone to a preacher evangelical boot camp, which was training people to fight in quote unquote spiritual warfare against demonic forces in our country. It is unambiguous that he's right wing. He voted for Trump in the last election. He killed a Democrat and her husband and shot a Democratic state senator. So It's clear that there's tons of violence coming from the right. The same day that Kirk was shot, a neo-Nazi shot up a school in Colorado. But of course, a lot of these right-wing pundits don't want to acknowledge that fact because it's not convenient for their narrative.
It feels like there's a huge double standard here as well. Like, we're so desensitized to young white dudes shooting up schools and killing 13 people that we don't even pay attention to that anymore. And we just put so much focus on one. It wasn't even a minority. This person was apparently living with someone who was maybe going to be transgender, potentially over the next year. And that's what they're trying to use to say this was a trans shooting, which is absolutely wild. The point is, we've become so desensitized to these right-wing mass shooters. We can point to the Tree of Synagogue shooting. We can point to the El Paso Walmart shooting. We can point to a black church that was shot up where 9 people were killed by a white supremacist, and people carved shit on their guns. They carve white supremacist stuff on their guns. Over the past decade, there's a slew of examples of 10, 25 people being killed in mass shootings, and it's not a competition. We're not trying to compete to see which side. It's not that. I'm just saying, at the end of the day, if you want to look at the raw stats, right-wing violence is way more prominent due to the way right-wing ideology works. They want to conserve or preserve, according to them. And to do that, they have to essentially go out and kill what they view as a threat to their conservative ideology. And then you have figures in a top-down manner like Donald Trump using rhetoric that only emboldens his supporters, uses rhetoric that gets his supporters at the Capitol on January 6th. Then he pardons them. So I want to ask you this. When Elizabeth Warren said out in the parking lot at Capitol Hill that Democrats have nothing to apologize for, Trump is the first one that needs to apologize. How do you feel about that framework?
I think it's absolutely true. I mean, there's this notion that somehow Democrats are responsible for every extreme, action done by somebody on the radical left. Whenever a lot of these people on the extreme left don't even support the Democrats, they spend more time attacking Democrats than they do attacking Republicans. They shame people that voted for Kamala Harris. Why are we responsible for the heinous acts that some random radical leftist communist does? And meanwhile, they're not responsible for acts that neo-Nazis do or fascists do. In fact, a lot of the assassinations and right-wing, politically motivated murders we see are actually by people that were genuinely Republicans, but they, of course, take no responsibility. This is a ridiculous standard. We have to claim responsibility and apologize for the crimes and terrible actions committed by the very small number of people on the left that do bad things, even when they have nothing to do with us. Meanwhile, they don't have to take any responsibility for people that are explicitly and openly Republicans motivated by Republican rhetoric. This is a ridiculous way to present the current situation we have to deal with in regards to extremism in our country. But it's clear why they're doing it, Adam. The reason why Stephen Miller and all of these other high-profile Republicans are beating this drum that it's the Democrats' fault is because they want purges. There's so many of them that are calling for all Antifa-aligned organizations, left-wing organizations, to be shut down. They want to go silence every single pro-democracy organization in this country with this blanket characterization that all somehow they've contributed to these specific crimes of political violence. It's ridiculous. It's depraved. It's authoritarian. And honestly, unfortunately, it's unsurprising with what we've seen from these people in the past. It doesn't surprise me at all, but it is worthy of criticism because it's terrible what they're doing.
It's funny, just a few days ago, it's not funny, but Brian Kilmeade went on Fox News and was saying that homeless people should face involuntary lethal injection. So on Fox News, which is the most famous news network in America for some reason, they're saying to millions and millions of people across the country that we should involuntarily euthanize people who are on the streets. Yet when we say that that's a little bit authoritarian, they try to say that we're the ones being divisive for using bad words. Maybe they shouldn't be saying this in the first place. I'm going to leave it there. Thank you to Micah Irfan. You can find all of his socials in the first link in the description below. We'll do it again, and peace out.